Hello my lovelies, Rob here from Kickback Garage. Really exciting news in this video. The moment we've all been waiting for, me at least, it is the new Rob Gray designed lambretta shock. Grab a coffee, I'm going to tell you all about it. Yes! For the guys and girls that follow the channel for the last couple of years and follow me on Instagram and Facebook, if you don't do that, go and do that, you will know that I have been working on a new shock for the lambretta. Really, the thing is, I want to go right back to the background info on this. I tested a couple of years ago, I'll throw it up on there on a link. I tested a couple of shocks, and the BGM one in particular didn't really tickle my fancy, the way that it worked and stuff like that. And the cool thing is BGM Pro, after I released that video, BGM Pro, they took contact with me and they asked me, what can we do to make it better? And since then, I've done loads and loads of work trying to develop a lambretta shock that I can go good for, and it's finally come, and it's probably a big surprise to you all, but yeah, it's BGM, the new iteration of the BGM shock. Now this is released today, so run out and buy it. The quicker you buy it, the more chance I have being able to collaborate with other things, but this particular one is a series of 1 to 50 with my signature on the top there in stylish black. Suits almost everything, but don't worry if you're not fast enough to grab this particular one. All the new BGM lambretta shocks come with this tune, so that's that should keep you sorted and safe on the roads for years to come. So what I thought I'd do is go really techie on this, because I've had a few people asking me if I can do sort of tech specs and stuff like that, and I'll show you what goes into testing and development of a real proper shock. So without further ado, we'll have a look at my fancy drawing. In proper Kickback Garage style, I decided to just draw you a drawing, and I've got some things there to show you as well, of how a basic shock works. I initially wanted to throw up an animation, but because I don't make animations myself, I didn't want to pull one down off the interwebs and end up with some sort of copyright infringement. So we're doing it back to basic style here. So the basics of a damper are: you have the shock body, you have the damper shaft, which is the shaft in the center, you have a control rod of some sort if it's adjustable. This one obviously has adjustable rebound, and you have the piston, the seal head, and that's basically it. Now this part here, this is the IFP. The IFP separates the nitrogen charge that you have in the bottom of the shock against the oil, which is here. That's what these squiggly lines are for. They're supposed to signify that's oil. It's in here, you know. Yeah, so I digress. So the importance of the IFP height, this can be adjusted after oil volume, and the charge, how much pressure that you put in the shock, is also very critical to how the damper actually works. Now the reason for having this is the fact that if you have a simple damper, if you take, for example, a damper from a lambretta front fork, the cheap ones, the C-back or something like that, if you pull those really hard apart, you can hear it sort of a squishy sound. What's happening there is that you are pulling air into the oil, and you get oil aeration, and that means that the shock, especially with an advanced one like this, it won't work how it's supposed to. Now, when I first looked at the BGM shock and took it apart, I was having all sorts of problems trying to get the oil flow to work as well as I wanted it to. There are a couple of reasons for that. It was the way that the shim stack was designed, and what I mean by the shim stack is, if I take this isn't the BGM shock, by the way. This is just one I had lying around. Let me take off the piston bolt. Now, this has just got one shim on it, and that's basically because I don't want to give away any trade secrets. Then you have the piston itself, and as you can see in the piston, there are different configurations of holes. The original piston on the BGM was working fine, so I decided to keep it as it is. And as you can see, the rebound side and the compression side have different size holes. Don't want to get too technical in how that works, but to control the oil flow, when you compress the shock, to control the oil flow through the piston, you need to have shims which slow down and control the oil. Now, what I decided to do was I went for something that is called a standard pyramid shim stack. And another thing that I did was I doubled the amount of shims that were in the shock. I think initially we had like 10 shim stacks. I narrowed it down to 6. We went into production with 3 prototypes, and I tested all of them, and the one that's in the new shock now is the one that I was most satisfied with, although probably 2 of them could have ended up in the shock without too much difference. Like I said, to control the oil flow from the bottom of the piston through to the top chamber above the piston, you need this shim stack. Now, I went for something that looks like this, and as you can see, it is shaped like a pyramid, hence the name, and the same on the rebound shim stack. It's shaped like a pyramid. Now, the reason why I went for this is a classic shock build-up. The reason why I went for the classic pyramid shim stack is that you can have really, really thin shims here, here, and here. And then you can go for a fatter shim, and then fatter even still, and then you have some spaces at the top, which I had to change out the shims to test them. And the reason why I do that is because when the oil flows through the piston like this, it bends the shim. Now, if I take a shim, you can actually see it quite bendable. It's not a washer, it's a very bendy thing. Now, these come in a million different thicknesses and sizes, so yeah, it was a lot of work trying to figure out which one would work best. But the reason why I went for the pyramid style shim stack is that when you're riding on the merrily along the road and you're just hitting small bumps and undulations, then you bend the first shim and maybe the second shim, and with those being a little bit thinner, it feels really, really subtle. But if you get like a sudden shock, like a British pothole, then the oil has to fight against the shims that are further up the shim stack. So this gives the effect that the harder the hit that you get, the more control and feeling you get from the oil running through the passages. So it literally stiffens up the and slows down the speed of the hit, which makes it a much more enjoyable ride. And what this also means is that I can really fine tune the small bump complacency, and we're still not going to have problems. If you hit something massive, you're not going to be bottoming out all the time. So that's sort of the reasoning behind that. So are you following me? I hope you're not finding this boring, but this is how this stuff works. And I did say I was going to do a proper tech update of what I did. So that was something that we worked ages and ages with. The IFP height here, worked with ages, and I tried 100 different IFP pressures or nitrogen pressures just to get the feel that I wanted, because I really wanted this to be a nice, really nice subtle shock that feels good on the road, that grips the road really well. You really can't feel this thing working underneath you. It just feels like a magic carpet. But if you're a boy racer and you have a really powerful engine, we didn't want it to be that supple in the mid-range of the stroke, because what happens then is that when you pull the throttle, you can actually end up bottoming out the damper just on throttle response. So that's also a reason why I went for this pyramid shim stack design. Now another thing we looked at was the shape of the tip of this adjuster here. Now the oil flows on rebound, the oil flows through the shim stack, and it is controlled by this little bleed port on the end here. And this is the shaft, and the magic works at the end of the tip here. So what I did, I re-tapered the tip of this damping rod. I actually made 3 on the lathe. I think I've got a picture. I'll stick up a picture if I can find it. And I made 3 of these that I tested with the different shim stacks, and when I was completely happy with both the shim stack and the taper, I sent the drawings down to BGM, and they made me up 3 shocks with the 3 shim stacks that we had left. We used the original type mechanism and 2 of the ones that I designed, and we actually ended up on the one I've designed. And when I finally found a shim stack that I was happy with, an oil viscosity I was happy with, and then the IFP depth and IFP charge, we sent all the gubbins down to BGM, who manufactured the final shock, which is here. It looks pretty much like the BGM shock I tested, obviously apart from the signature. But there's also some other stuff we looked at as well. This was a serious case of no stone unturned, because when BGM contacted me and asked me what we could do to improve it, I went through the whole workings of this shock. Now, if you look at quite a few of the lambretta shocks, aftermarket lambretta shocks that are on the market at the moment, they've obviously gone to a motorbike designer and used the fattest diameter shaft, that's this one, that they could get hold of. Now, that's sort of good because it makes it nice and stiff. The problem being is that the wider the diameter on your shaft, it means that you have to have more seal area, and more seal area makes more friction. And because I was looking for a subtle shock that will tackle the small bumps just as good as the big bumps, we actually ended up with the size. I'm obviously not going to tell you which size it is. The size that we've got here, it's more than beefy enough for your lambretta, but it's not as beefy as say an R1, a Yamaha R1 shock. And that's because a Yamaha R1 shock has to put up with a lot more stress than a lambretta shock does. Now, the reason why I redesigned the taper here is on the adjustment mechanism, which, if I put this the right way around, is here, obviously. That moves the rod down the damper shaft and over this hole here, bleed port. The reason why I adjusted that is because I wanted a bigger range of adjustment so that you can really dial this in. But the good thing about that as well is if you're a complete numpty and don't really know what you're doing, although I'm going to do a video on how to set this up. If you just set it up really quick and say you're about 5 or 6 clicks out either way, then it's still going to perform pretty good. It's not going to be spot on, but you can. It's almost like you can just put it on, set your preload and your sag, and away you go. And that makes it a lot easier. And there's a much bigger chance of your average scooterist getting this pretty much in the ballpark as for settings. Right, another nice feature about this shock is the fact that you can adjust it so that you can use this on your series 1, 2 or 3. I think this length is round about 300, and you can wind out the eyelet here at the bottom so that you can adjust it up to 310. So that will fit your series 1 and your series 2. 300 obviously is the series 3. We have also designed a longer eyelet so you can jack that up even more. We had a few problems on the track where races are grounding out exhausts, and they would like a longer shock. So that is now possible. I'm not sure when that's coming live on the website, but it's coming for those that want to do that. Another thing that I did, I found out that with the spring that initially came on the shock, I had all sorts of problems trying to, when I set the sag correctly, and I set the compression correctly, the rebound was just way too slow. So what we ended up doing there was I tested a couple of different progressive springs, and there's a lot of information out there on the internet about springs, so I'm not going to really delve into that too deep. But I'm not really a big fan of progressive springs on proper shock because of the way that it compromises performance. I really prefer, because a lambretta is one-to-one actuation, single pivot on the rear. Most motorbikes, you have to take in consideration, they have a linkage system which makes the rear end perform in a progressive manner. Now that's another reason why I went for the pyramid shim stack, is because that is a progressive shim stack. A spring by nature is linear. That means that it's got the same amount, it takes the same amount of force through the whole stroke to compress it, and to control it we change the gubbins on the inside of the shock. And I really did prefer the beefier spring. I think we tried 4 or 5 different springs and we landed on the 230 pound spring, which will suit your average scooterist better. Now if you weigh under 70 kilos and you never have a passenger, then I would recommend the 210 spring. But over 75 kilos, 80 kilos with gear, then this is the spring for you. Because of Corona and stuff like that, and the fact that this does take a long time, I have literally done thousands and thousands of kilometers over the last 2 years on at least 10 different shock configurations to finally get what I think is the perfect balance of a nice subtle shock without the need to use a piggyback, you know, the extra reservoir, because we've optimized the oil amount in the shock there. That's another thing I was going to tell you about. Not only does a fat damper shaft give you more friction, it also displaces more oil. So then the oil has a bigger chance of overheating. And when the oil overheats, if you imagine like brakes, hydraulic brakes, if they overheat, you cook the oil and it stops functioning as it's supposed to. And so that's what I wanted to avoid as well with the slightly thinner diameter damper shaft. compared to the motorbike type shocks. Right, like I was saying, it was a lot of R&D that went into this shock. A lot of time out on the road, testing, taking off shocks, putting new shocks on, back to back, you name it. But it was a lot of fun as well. And sitting here with the finished part in my hand is seriously surreal, because a little guy like me just hasn't got the capacity or the money to be able to put my own shock into production. And because they think I did such a good job, they've made this special edition version of this shock, which is only 50 pieces. So if you're really quick, you can get hold of one of these. And there's only me and 49 others that have got this. It's really cool. But don't worry, if you miss out on this particular shock, this tune that we have developed is the tune that's coming on all the new BGM lambretta shocks. So that was the lowdown on the shock. I have to say, I'm absolutely in love with the way that it works. Like I said, consecutive brake bumps or bumps in the road, potholes, it tackles it all. And that's because of the way that I've designed it. It feels quite plush when you sit on the scooter, when you've set up the sag correctly. I have designed this for slightly more sag than is normal on the rear shock. So it's really pleasant ride. But when you get on the gas, because of the way that the shim stack is built up, it gives some really nice mid-range support, so you don't get that massive bottoming out if you've got a really strong engine or your pie-eating pillion starts fidgeting. So this will work really well for everyday use, and it's very comfortable to ride. And because of the way that we've designed the internals, it also feels as though you've got more suspension than you've actually got, which is always a good thing. And just to recap slightly, this limited edition Kickback Garage Rob Gray Signature Edition shock, this is just going to be made in 50 pieces. They're on the website now. Snap those up if you want something a bit special. If you're unlucky and you miss one, don't worry, this is the same tune that's in all the new BGM rear shocks. Now, the reason why there isn't a paid promotion thing on this is the fact that I've done this for free. Obviously, I've been supplied parts and shims and pistons and stuff like that, but all the work I've done for free, mostly because I really wasn't satisfied with the shocks that were out on the market at the time I started this project, and I fancied having something proper myself. And I'm a bit of a fickle when it comes to how my suspension works. I have worked as a suspension technician for about 12 years or something like that before I started the job that I do now, so I do know what I'm talking about, and I'd really love to hear your feedback on how this works after you've bought it. And if you want to have a little bit of help setting this up, then have a look at my videos. I'm also releasing a video on how to set this up, and although it's about the BGM shock, it's basically the same way I like to set up all my shocks. So I hope you didn't get bored by this video. Got a little bit technical without giving away too many details. And I love you and leave it. It's so much fun having your own products. Anyway, I love you and leave you. I'll see you in the next one. Ta-ra!